Welcome all in, everybody, for a Saturday edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. WCC play begins today, a full slate of 4 games, plus a couple of non-conference matchups as well. Obviously, Gonzaga UCLA is the key one on that. And today I am joined by Connor Hope from the Heat Check College Basketball and also Sleepers Media, Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org, and also the Field of 68 mid-major show, and Jack Breslin from Santa Clara Basketball Podcast. Thanks all of you guys for hopping on. We have conference play beginning today, and I just wanted to get like your initial thoughts of what just kind of the excitement of today is now that we're nearly done with non-conference and we get to see these in-league matchups once again.
I guess I'll go first. I mean, I think I think there are actually some pretty good matchups for the first day of conference play. Specifically for me, it's that Loyola Marymount versus San Francisco game. But I also think the Pacific St. Mary's game has some sneaky appeal to it because Pacific's been pretty feisty early on in the non-conference. It was pretty feisty. And we have seen St. Mary's be, I guess, a bit up and down as of late again against better teams than Pacific. But while I don't necessarily expect St. Mary's to lose, I think this game could be like a little bit of a tougher road win for the Gales than you would like it to be against Pacific. And it's kind of like at that perfect time slot because it's right at 5. So if you're watching WCC hoops, it's right after the Gonzaga game, or I guess a couple hours after the Gonzaga game, but right before, like, leading into that LMU San Francisco game. So for anyone with ESPN Plus, like, they can go in and see what I think is probably the second best game of the day.
So let's kind of get into a little bit of that depth of the league, because we talk about Pacific kind of being it's a sneaky game or whatnot. But this is a league right now that has 6 teams that are going to at least be in the conversation for an at-large, or at least as they stand right now. You have 6 in the top 76. So even Santa Clara being that one who's lowest at the number still could work their way back into the conversation, even if it's very slight chance. Kind of talk about what maybe how many teams you see kind of going into the NCAA tournament at this stage. How many tournament teams do you see? Who's maybe been a surprise, and are there concerns of maybe the 5 who are those real contenders to get into the dance?
Yeah, Zach, I'm guessing that might be for me. So I'll just say, yeah, I think, the league's in a weird quandary a little bit coming into league play. Now we know about the foundation of St. Mary's and what they did last year after a slow start. They've done it before. They were able to put their foot on the gas and win the league and win the conference tournament. But this is a different league. We've got 2 Power 5 teams joining for 2 years with the Oregon State Beavers and the Washington State Cougars, and they're in that 5 team mix. I think it should also be clarified that between 51 and 76, 5 of those teams live. Only Gonzaga is in the top 10, and of course, a shoe in to make the tournament at this point. But so there's 2 different ways to look at that. One, it's awesome to have the WCC to have 6 teams in the top 76 and 5 of those teams in that range. On the other hand, it's a little scary because if you want to go off any kind of rule of thumb, obviously there's a lot of variables within the selection process. But a good rule of thumb is you want to be in the top 45 or higher. Obviously, last year the Indiana State Sycamores finished around 30th and did not get in. So there's a lot of nuance to it. But right now, nobody's touching that top 45 quite yet. And some of that has to do with St. Mary's recent home loss to Utah State. And I think the other big concern is between these 5 teams, there's only 3 quad 1 wins so far, with St. Mary's having 2 and Washington State having 1, and everybody else with a non-conference goose egg, despite having a bunch of opportunities across the board. So there's still a lot to be proven. Back to the good news, Zach, with all these teams playing each other, most of them playing each other twice, I believe. You're going to see a lot more in-conference opportunities than we've ever seen before in the WCC. So again, the track record of St. Mary's has me optimistic they'll find their way there. And I think between the other four, if you're just rooting for the league as a whole, you just want one of those teams to get pretty hot to take a third bid. Otherwise, we might be stuck with two at the end.
Yeah, that's almost kind of like where I'm thinking is that right now I'm almost would pencil in 2 and 3 really now seems a bit of a stretch. Do we think that because of what we've seen so far to this point, obviously we'll see once these teams start playing each other, that could they just end up cannibalizing each other because like they're just going to end up beating each other up, and unfortunately that might just leave obviously like maybe a tournament capable team left at home.
I think that's the more likely scenario. I think there's a better chance of that than the other way, where somebody like a Santa Clara or any of these five really can just run through the table. This league's going to create new challenges that I don't think we've been used to before. Go into places. I actually think a team like Washington State might even have, and Oregon State might have a little bit more of an edge than San Francisco and Santa Clara because their home court environments are going to create more of a travel disturbance. And I think in general, if those teams are continuing to succeed, they're going to have bigger, better home crowds than as much as we love the Hilltop and I love the Levy Center. Those home court environments are going to be even tougher to win on because those fans, those communities are used to Power Five basketball, and these are going to be high level basketball games, and their teams are both very solid. So I think if anybody can do it, it'd be those teams being able to protect their home court.
Yeah, Zach, if I can jump in. So the way I think about this as, a super fan of a mid-major is you break it down to the quads 1 and 2 and then quads 3 and 4. Roughly speaking, historically, right, last year, the last 4 teams in were Boise, Colorado State, and Virginia. They were all right around 500 in quads 1 and 2. And they had a maximum of 1 loss in quads 3 and 4. So if you look at the net breakdown right now of that kind of second tier group of teams behind Gonzaga, there are 2 teams that fall into that category right now, and it's Washington State and St. Mary's. Washington State is 4-3 in quads 1 and 2, 6-0 in 3 and 4. St. Mary's is 500 in quads 1 and 2 with 3 losses and 3 wins, and 6-0 in quads 3 and 4. So I have those 3 in right now, and I think with a very strong conference, right, like you just said, 6 teams in the top 76 of the net, there's not that many games anymore. You still have the bottom half of the league that are consistently quad 3 and 4 games. So these teams have a lot of opportunities to go in and get more quad 1 and 2 wins. And I think it's going to be 3 teams because of that.
Kind of what are you looking at in this front? Right now it feels like it's tough between that 2 and 3 number right now.
Yeah, I would probably lean 2. Look, right now Gonzaga obviously safely in. St. Mary's, I think, has done enough. They have the win over Nebraska, the road win over Utah, and then they kind of haven't lost to a bad team, and neither like. Washington State's loss to Washington should age okay. But again, Washington could go into Big Ten play and just absolutely get rocked by every team they play. That's not outside the realm of possibility. The most frustrating part about this is that the team, and I'm not trying to pick on Jack, the team with the best schedule, and I maintain this from the beginning of the season, was Santa Clara. They scheduled really well. They've been playing well as of late. They got the road win over McNeese. They have the win on a neutral against Bradley. They have the win over TCU. But McNeese and TCU are disappointing their expectations. And they do have those 3 losses in a row, including the home loss to North Dakota State. That's kind of, I think, that's if you look at the end of the season and Santa Clara's, in the NIT, and they had a really good season in WCC play, like the death nail will be games 2 through 4, where they could have picked up at least 1 or 2 wins, but it's that's the life of the mid-major. Very little room for error. So,
and that North Dakota State game is almost like it was obviously very troubling when it happened because of just the perception and everything else. I mean, North Dakota State has proven that they're actually much better than we all originally thought they were. That all that said, it's like that's still a game that Santa Clara should have had and could have had, obviously late in that one. As we're starting to look at the slate going into today, Connor, I know you already talked a little bit about Pacific St. Mary's, but who's maybe like, is there for the group, what's another WCC game or player you're watching on Saturday that might be something that is going to be a telling sign of what we might see moving forward for the rest of league play?
Well, yeah, I think, I don't want to steal from Jack's thunder a little bit, but I think the Santa Clara Pepperdine game is actually maybe the most intriguing, basically for two reasons. One, I'm not sure the status on Elijah Mahi. He, of course, missed the last game. He was in a boot. We've had holidays since then. If he doesn't play, I think that opens the door for an upset even further. Obviously, Pepperdine coming off of the absolute drubbing of UC Davis. They've gotten on a roll playing home games, but earlier in the non-conference, they were really figuring things out and were bad on the road. So which Pepperdine are we going to get? I think, with the Waves, freshman Jackson Olvera, getting him in the mix more. They've played so much better, and quite frankly, when they were playing Zion Bethea more, they were pretty bad. They've started to limit his minutes. I think they've made some nice adjustments as a staff, but again, lot of intrigue there just because of the Mahi factor and the way Pepperdine destroyed UC Davis, and they come in 4 out of 5 winners. And then I think the other one really is. Portland is, of course, projected near the bottom of the league, as they probably should be. But this is a big spot for them. Very few and far between home opportunities against a quote-unquote Power 5. They get that right out of the gate with Washington State coming to town on a Saturday in the Child Center. This should be one of the better environments all year long there. And I think their players would be up for this game. Washington State, of course, they're going to go to Portland today and turn around and host Loyola Marymount on Monday. So, if Wazoo comes out and owns the first half, they should be fine. But the longer this game stays close, it could get really, really interesting in Portland tonight.
Think potential for one of those, like you start to overlook a team like Portland, something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's a tough. I mean, when Portland has that good home crowd, a lot like Pacific, they're going to play at a very high intensity level. San Francisco found out the hard way a couple of years ago, the year they got in. They really struggled up there. And, Shantae's got some history with some of these guys coming from Eastern Washington and so forth. Should be a really interesting game between him and his predecessor, David Riley, as well.
I can take it. Yeah, obviously, of course, I'm going to talk about Santa Clara. Pepperdine scares me a little bit for two reasons. Number one, they're getting hot. Just like Rocco said, came off a 40-point-plus win against UC Davis. But second, the kid, Stefan, how do you say his last name? Todorovic. He's a hot and cold guy. And hot and cold guys always scare me because it seems like every time we get one of those guys, they end up being hot when we play against them. The kid can go for 30. He's done it twice this year. So if you get him on a night where he's feeling good, maybe you're not as engaged on the defensive end, anything can happen. So, Pepperdine makes my heart beat a little bit. Lost some sleep last night over it, but we're going to find out today. And then player to watch, of course, obviously Santa Clara. I'm going with Johnny O'Neill. If we can get the Johnny O'Neill that was in conference last year and the Johnny O'Neill that just played against South Dakota with 16 points, 4 of 6 from 3, I think it changes the landscape offensively for this team because you can have a lineup with Elijah Mahi, Christoph Tilley, Adama Ball, and Carlos Stewart, and then you throw in a Johnny O'Neill that's making shots. I don't know what you do defensively because you have 5 guys now that can dribble, pass, and shoot, and 5 guys that if you leave them on an island, they can hurt you. They can create for themselves one-on-one. So keep an eye on Johnny O'Neill. I think his performance will be greatly indicative of offense for the rest of the season for Santa Clara.
Connor, who's someone maybe you're watching this week or on this opening slate of games?
I think right now for me, the big name is Javon Porter. He has had a rough December shooting the ball. He's 7 of 27 from 3. He's 13 of 34 from 2-point range. And this was like immediately following a 30-point performance or 29-point performance against Wyoming to really carry LMU over Wyoming. And I think they're going to need that from him in this game against San Francisco on the road. Like they're going to need a star performance to beat these Dons. And you can't have him go 1 of 6 from deep and expect to win. You can't have him go 2 of 6, 1 of 5 around the basket and expect to win. And he also kind of just needs to not turn the ball over because that's also been an issue the past couple of weeks. So that's the game I'm watching. And specifically because I think, Javon Porter came in billed as the star for LMU in the last month, while he's still, the team's leading scorer this season. He hasn't necessarily always looked the part of their best player. And when you're going up against one of these top 6 teams, as probably the most likely the most likely team to knock off one of these top 6 teams, you really need that performance from Porter. And it's going to be, I don't know what the environment's going to be like, considering it's New Year, a couple days before New Year's. I don't think students are going to be there. So, but after 16 total points against Nevada and Colorado State to start the month, I think Porter needs a big performance to start the WCC season off strong.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one. And so I'm going to actually pivot a little bit because we talked to both Rocco and Jack obviously brought up Santa Clara Pepperdine, which is actually initially where I was going to go. So I'm actually going to go a different direction, thinking about players to watch. I'm watching Marcus Williams because this is a guy we know when he's right can take over ball games, but we haven't seen it on a night in night out basis. And without Guido Newberry being available for the Dons, it becomes even more critical for him to have one of those really good games and to carry them in a game like this. Now, Malik Thomas has been obviously really good all season long. He's one of those guys I look at as potentially a player of the year candidate, but he needs that running mate to go with him. And Marcus Williams is that guy. And if he can do it on a more consistent basis, and especially against LMU to kind of kick off league play, that's who I'm looking to kind of see take that step back to kind of where we've seen him at his best in the past. And I'm thinking about, again, Connor alluded to it, of who's maybe the biggest threat to play spoiler in league. Obviously LMU is the maybe the obvious answer because they're that next team after this top 6 and have a ton of talent. But is there someone else in league, or is it just LMU of who can maybe play spoiler so every so often in league play? Because there are a couple of sneaky teams that I'm keeping eyes on.
Yeah, I'll go first. The 9-point road loss at Colorado, 9-point road loss at Illinois State, 7-point loss at UNLV has me believing that Pacific will always have themselves, or not always, but they will have a few games this year against those top 6 where they're in a position to make things a little bit more sweaty than the opposing team wants, especially at home. And all you need is one of those to flip, right? All of a sudden, all you need is one team to collapse down the stretch. And when I'm looking at potential spoilers of these bottom teams, I want to see a team that has consistently put themselves in a position to make things close. And Pacific has done that. Don't look at their record is awful because they've lost all of those games. But I think when you put yourself in positions to win, wins will follow. And that's what Pacific has done against top talent. I think a little bit better than the other teams in the bottom 4.
Yeah, I think Pepperdine's the team for now, based on the last month of play. Right, just looking at the film of all these teams, they're popping right now in the last month of play with a top 30 effective field goal percentage defense. I think the more impressive part about blowing out UC Davis was holding them into the 40s. That's a team with T.Y. Johnson, an all Big West guy that's just a lighted up scorer and a bunch of good weapons around him. And I also think, if that can carry over to the road, which we'll start to learn today against Santa Clara, that's how you're going to be able to pull off upsets is defensively. The problem with Pacific, San Diego, and Portland right now is they all have atrocious defenses in the last month. So they have a lot to correct there. I agree with Connor long term. Dave Smart's a great strategist. They had those guys clicking a little bit better earlier, but they've really started to come apart at the seams the last couple of weeks. So this is going to be an ebb and flow situation. Obviously, Pepperdine's got a lot of newness themselves, and depending on a couple of young guys to make this all work. But I do like their organization lately defensively, and they're going to have to step up in competition to prove they can knock off some of these teams. When it comes to LMU, I just wanted to add one other thought. Caleb Stone Carrawell was tremendous against a very good North Alabama team, went for 28. He had a slow start to the season, obviously an old guy, played for Austin Peay, played for Charlotte. Now he's at LMU. But I think he's a legit threat. Hit 5 threes in that game. I think if LMU starts running more of their offense through him, take some of the load off Porter, give the opposing defenses more to prepare for, obviously they're going to be more well-rounded and be able to knock off more teams. So that's something to watch for tonight as well.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just going to say, Rocco just said everything I was going to say in a much more articulate way. But it's Pepperdine for me, obviously outside of LMU, because I think they're kind of in a tier of their own where they're in between like the upper echelon, the Washington State, San Francisco, St. Mary's, and, you know, in between them and the lower echelon of the league. It's Pepperdine for me. Just, I kind of said it before, just low floor, high ceiling team. And if you catch them on the night where they're feeling good, you know, I think anything can happen.
I will say, like, I'm going to go with Pacific. I still think they're the team I lean more toward than Pepperdine. But I mean, the fact that you also have a guard like Mo Odom on that squad who knows how to run an offense, can really he'll be able to find his shooters all over the court. Like, he has obviously WCC experience. He knows what this league looks like, coming over from Pacific, going to Pepperdine. That's a huge, obviously, chip that they have going for them. But for Pacific, I just keep looking at the fact that Connor talked about the margins of victories, or the fact that they've stayed in a lot of these games. The one thing they do actually well is they rebound the ball. Like, they are third in the league in offensive rebounding. They're fourth in rebounding margin, ahead of Santa Clara. They also get to the free throw line a lot. Elijah Fisher is 11th best he has 11th most free throw attempts in all of college basketball. So they are a team that's going to slow it down a lot. And there are going to be some teams that this might become frustrating to play a team like Pacific. And yes, they've definitely had some struggles the last few weeks. They haven't played as well as they did early on. But there are some numbers that are showing that they're at least going to stay in a lot of these contests. And all they need is, honestly, like, because they're not a good 3-point shooting team, they just need one good 3-point shooting night, and that would actually probably get them a win against one of these better teams as we get deeper and deeper into conference play. And just thinking about looking at what we have the rest of league, it was like, I'm going to jump a little bit to, like, who's maybe like a breakout star, like, that we're seeing that might pop out of this group, because we've seen a lot of young talent really really start to play well from up and down the league. Who's maybe someone that you think is going to maybe take that next step once we get to WCC play in its totality?
Yeah, I'll jump in there, Zach. Well, I'm very intrigued by Layla Vicious for Oregon State, the Lithuanian superstar. Played excellent basketball at the U20 FIBA 2023. Sneaky roster addition in September by Wayne Tinkle. And the guy is a top 50 most efficient player per KenPom so far this year. And he's not even getting, a full workload of minutes. But I think as we get into some serious WCC, games for positioning, those top 6 level games, this guy can really be a stone cold shooter, player, guy that doesn't make very many mistakes, older than his years. Some people have him down as a freshman. The website has him as a sophomore. I'm not sure how any of that works, but anyway, they have him on the team, and that's all that matters. And I really love his poise and his overall talent. I think he's got pro level talent. Not sure if that's just for Europe or if he's got NBA looks yet, but that's certainly a guy not getting enough attention nationally. I'll go with some low hanging fruit as well, and then let you guys take over. I think there's a lot of choices. Malik Thomas, I don't even know if he qualifies anymore, but he was outstanding. The game I was at just a couple weeks ago in Milwaukee, put the team on his back, scored 35 as they beat Loyola Chicago. And I think your boys, the Gales, Mikey Lewis, I think has to start getting more and more of a usage share. I was a little disappointed on, he didn't get into the game against Utah State till about 9 minutes in. I really think he's been the superior player to Ross so far, and probably the more talented guy. Ross really struggling to shoot the ball at all three levels, 2-point, 3-point, and free throw. And we saw it last year with Mahaney in a funk. Eventually, Marshallonis took over, and the rest was history. Marshallonis, of course, still a very important part of the backcourt, obviously. But I think if St. Mary's really wants to start, getting big leads on teams, running more offense through Lewis, I think would benefit them.
I'll go next. I've got two. The one for me, same team as my player to watch. Will Johnston as a facilitator in this LMU offense has been fantastic, and he's done it while also decreasing his turnovers. Like he wasn't a turnover machine before, but he just doesn't turn the ball over now, which is great to see. But I think the big one, the one that's going to jump off the page every time they play, and I think everyone had an inkling that he was going to explode this season, but I don't think anyone knew that his efficiencies would also skyrocket. Christoph Tilley has been fantastic this year. He's shooting better from everywhere on the court. He's become an even better rim protector than he was last year. And having a guy like that, especially in a conference where you have to go up against the St. Mary's and Gonzagas and San Francisco's, having a guy who can force those bigs away from the basket because he's a threat to shoot 2 to 3 threes a game, is just it's an asset that the Santa Clara team has been able to leverage, and I think it's going to be an asset that they're going to be able to leverage in WCC play.
Yeah, I'll build off that Tilley idea, and then I'll throw one more in. But Tilley this year, I think for the first time, his first 3-point attempt of his career came in the first game against St. Louis. He went 2 years where he didn't shoot threes. And I think what that has done for him offensively is now, like you just said, when you have to respect that, this is a 7-footer that can dribble pass, right? So if he can put it down in the ground, I'm most comfortable with him as a Bronco fan when he's got it in the lane and he's got a couple help guys coming at him and he can make a decision on where to distribute it. He's really good at that. And I think that changes our offense. I'll throw another Bronco in naturally. Elijah Mahi, that might be the low-hanging fruit. I don't know if he qualifies anymore. Strong, big, long, athletic. I think he's got a pro body. Again, another guy that can dribble, pass, and shoot. I'm not saying he's going to go to the league. I'm not sure if he handles it as well as he should. And I don't know where he lands on the all-conference teams because Santa Clara is a team that has 5 guys averaging double figures, and it kind of, Carlos Stewart goes for 20 one night, then it's Tilley, then it's Elijah. But this is a guy that I think that can make a big impact, and a name that a lot of people are going to be circling at the end of the year.
Yeah, like Mahi, maybe he's a little bit more of the known guy now because I think I have him on my short list. If he's healthy and he's playing like that, that's a guy who could end up being in the player of the year conversation throughout the rest of the course of the year. Now, I have a couple that are almost maybe low hanging fruit. I'm thinking of Pelis Morauskas as just the season he's had to this point at St. Mary's. Obviously, the 29-point performance against Utah, but this is someone who has been St. Mary's second best player all year long. He's shown up in big moments for them. He's been their best rebounder. While he isn't the greatest on the defensive end, we've seen some really, really critical performances from him throughout the course of the year. And getting in the WCC play is going to just be that next test for him to see how he can really manage some of the bigger front lines, obviously, that he's going to see: Washington State, Santa Clara, Gonzaga, all of those groups having just massive front lines, even Oregon State with a big front line as well. But maybe I'm gonna throw one out that is maybe not on the radar almost at all, and I'm gonna throw out Dusty Stromer because he has played so well over the course of the non-conference, and obviously he's not in that starting rotation, but he is in the rotation. We've seen some really good moments out of Stromer, and in the moments we've seen maybe some inconsistencies from Michael Ajayi or some of the others on the Gonzaga roster, he has been able to step in and have some big moments for the Zags. And so I like, while he's not going to get a huge number of minutes, like he's a guy who I think is absolutely going to get at least some key opportunities, and you'll see him be big in key moments throughout the rest of the season. And thinking about that, I'm going to transition to Gonzaga UCLA, because this is obviously the big matchup of the day, and this is a game that Gonzaga is they've struggled a little bit to close out some of these top tier teams. They struggled to close out Kentucky. They didn't close out West Virginia like we thought they should have. They've had a couple of games to kind of work things out since the UConn game, and we've seen Ben Gray play some really good minutes over the last month or so. Connor, like, kind of talk to us a little bit about just like what you're looking from the Zags going into this one. Is this a must win for them, or is like what do we need to see out of Gonzaga to kind of say they're pointed in the right direction after maybe some late game struggles against some good teams?
I think the cop out answer, and this is something that I picked up on earlier in the season, but it held true against Nichols and Bucknell. So I think it's just a trend that Gonzaga has. But I need to see a Gonzaga team that, regardless of if they're up or if they're trailing at the half, comes out of the half with a fire. Because if you look at Gonzaga against top 60 opponents, they have a plus 25, 26 or better in each 10-minute half of the first half and the second 10 minutes of the second half. They're minus 24 in the first 10 minutes coming out of halftime. Even if you take Kentucky out, which kind of skews a lot of those things, they're plus 24 or better in every one of those, except for coming out of the half where they're minus 12, if you don't count Kentucky against top 60 opponents. So I just think that this is a team that I expect them to come out and play UCLA well in the first half. But it's those first 10 to 15 possessions coming out of the halftime that have been killing Gonzaga this entire season. And if I'm going more like actual gameplay matchup, something to watch, it's going to be the chess match that happens in the front court, because UCLA's front court and Gonzaga's front court are both good. You could say they're great. They're both, I mean, the scoring catalyst of their teams. I question even UCLA with their defense. I question the front court defense's ability to stop a Huff or an EK for 40 minutes. And on the flip side, I question Huff and EK being able to follow Daly or Bilodeau out to the 3-point line on defense. And everyone's going to look at the stars in the backcourt and say that's the matchup to watch. But I think the chess match in the front court is going to be really interesting, because you mentioned Dusty Stromer. We've seen Stromer come out with Ben Gregg and Braden Huff in what I like to call the run stopper defense, the run stopper lineup. They come out when teams are going on runs, and it almost immediately stops the run. I don't necessarily want to see that early. I mean, you never want to see that early because you know the implications, but I don't want to see that early in this game. I want to see the chess match happen between EK and Bilodeau, between Ajayi and Daly, and try and, figure out, okay, whose front court is going to control the paint, because I think whichever front court controls the paint, the glass, is going to allow their backcourt to really shine.
Is there? All right, go ahead, Morocco.
Yeah, no, all good points. I believe in UCLA and Gonzaga, of course, very familiar with each other. Played last year in Honolulu, and several times before. So Cronin, of course, is known for the hard hedge, and Gonzaga, I think, will be well equipped to adjust. I don't think Gonzaga is going to be able to get what they typically like early. Be a lot of tweaks and adjustments, but I think the big difference with UCLA this year is not having a true rim protector like Adam Bona before. I think that makes things a little bit easier for the Bulldogs at the rim, just in terms of seeing UCLA's other big games against North Carolina just recently and some others where they were a little bit more vulnerable than usual at the rim. That's really the biggest difference in UCLA's defense, although, they are probably going to be able to control the pace. They're going to be very deliberate, and it's an exciting opportunity for them to play in the Clippers' new arena locally. But we also know Gonzaga fans are going to be down there in full force as they are everywhere. But I also think just big picture too, just bringing it out from a 50,000 foot lens. Gonzaga's already got the 3 losses, and UCLA only has 2, and they play in a league where they're going to play nothing but basically quad 1 and 2 games the rest of the season. I think this is just one of those games where Gonzaga not only schematically has a little bit of an edge, but also just has that a little extra mustard in the prep, in the tight moments. If this game stays tight through 40 minutes, to pull it out, and because they quite honestly need it more than UCLA.
Is there concern about because one of the things we've seen over the course of some of these tougher games is that Graham Ike's gotten in foul trouble pretty quickly in some of these contests, and
Yeah, that's a big deal.
if he does get into foul trouble early, how much does that kind of change the equation for what we might see in this contest? And because obviously that puts a lot more of it on on Braden Huff, and yes, he's played really well all season long. He's been a great. You could honestly it feels like you interchange them as the starter at this point. But how much pressure does that put on that Gonzaga front line if Ike's not going to be there, or how much does that hurt maybe their chances to pull this game out?
Yeah, they definitely drop off in athleticism without him. We saw it in the UConn game. Ike only played 12 minutes there. I think that's the easy example, right? So the whistle will be important too. I think somebody else was going to jump in. I just wanted to, add that note. Like there is a big drop off, I think, athleticism wise, because you don't have Watson anymore. You love Greg and Huff's game, and they play hard, they play physical, they're good Bulldogs, but just a different type of athlete in Ike.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the chess match because UCLA as a team, and it's the way Mick Cronin plays defense, but they are not no stranger to fouls and to fouling. So we could see a game where like Graham Ike, I think, could finish this game with 4 fouls and 13 free throws. Because like that's just the way I think this game could go. I'm less worried about Ike fouling early than I am about Hickman and Caliph Battle getting going early. Just because when Ike fouls early, he gets pulled out. You pull Braden Huff in, and while Braden Huff is a step down in athleticism, I don't necessarily think him compared to Bilodeau is like you're not losing much athleticism, if any, there. So for me, it's if Battle and Hickman get smothered by Kobe Johnson and Dylan Andrews, then Gonzaga could be in for a rough go because it'll allow UCLA, or if they're just not hitting open shots, it'll allow UCLA, I think, to put a help defender on the low post to try and like swat the ball away and stop Ike from turning to his shoulder and getting those shots off. So for me, Ike not fouling early is big, but even more so than that, it's those scoring wings need to score early in this contest.
Jack, let me get you in there.
Yeah, you're not going to get analysis like that from the Santa Clara guy. But I think just one thought to throw in is this Gonzaga team is like a couple possessions here and there for being undefeated. I think this is a better team than the number 14 next to their name and the AP poll indicates right now. I think this is a top 5, maybe top 7 team in the country. I have Gonzaga in this game. The only concern for me is, like you guys just said, can they close a game out? Because they're 1-3. The only close game they've won is against Arizona State on their home floor. They've really struggled against top tier opponents in close games. But that's all I got.
So I guess kind of taking that step back, if Gonzaga is unable to pull this one out, that ends up being their 4th loss, and albeit even if it's close, that still goes down as another L on their record. And if we're looking at what they are extrapolated out in a couple months, we still, I think most of us believe like they're going to win the WCC and they'll be the regular season champion, all that sort of stuff. But Do they become maybe like end up the most dangerous 4 seed in the tournament because we've seen kind of what they are, and while they haven't closed out close games against top tier opponents, they're just knocking on the door in all of these contests.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I think, it's a different era now. They got a 4 seed in 2018, but that was the last year of the RPI. So since the net started, we've had outside of the net four different metrics on the team sheet: two resume, two performance, actually three performance for a few years, and then we lost Sagrin last year. And this year, Torvik gets added to the performance side of the metrics on the team sheet, and the wins above bubble metric for the resume piece. So I don't think Gonzaga's got anything to worry about resume wise. They'll be in, win or lose today, and assuming they dominate in WCC like usual, lose no less than 2 games. Now, what we've seen in the last couple of NCAA tournament brackets is these performance metrics really impacting seeding, and that's really favored Gonzaga. You saw last year they went from the bubble to a 5 seed, and that's because in things like Ken Palm and obviously the net itself and the other performance metrics, Gonzaga was a top 20 team across the board, in some cases top 10. So they got all the way up to the 5 line. And I think that could happen again this year, even if they take the 4 losses. If they come in, like Jack said, if they come in a top 7 team according to performance, and we've already got the selection part done, and we're now on to seeding, they might actually sneak up to a 3 still, just with today's climate of how the committee views the seeding process.
All right, now thinking about where where maybe this top six are going to all finish. I'm pretty sure we all kind of have Gonzaga kind of like penciled in, almost like maybe sharpied in at the one spot as of right now. But looking at the rest of this top six, because it does seem like this is going to be a group that's going to beat up on each other. It's going to be really competitive. It's going to be fun to see how this all breaks down. But who do you see kind of like finishing out like this 1 through 6, and in what order?
For me, it's Gonzaga 1. Never bet against Randy Bennett. St. Mary's 2. I like Washington State. I've liked the way David Riley coaches, even when he was at Eastern Washington. He kind of takes that. They might be the fastest team, maybe San Diego, but they might be the fastest team played tempo wise in the conference, which I think can throw a lot of teams off. And I also think that they've looked, even in some of their losses, outside of the SMU loss, which came right after they lost Cedric Howard, they've looked competitive in the road loss to Washington, the road loss to Iowa. So I like Washington State at 3. To me, it becomes kind of a toss-up. You can go any way. I'm going to go with what I perceive as the talent of San Francisco at 4, then Santa Clara, then Oregon State. I think San Francisco and Santa Clara I don't know if this is spicy, but they have a pretty sizable coaching advantage over Oregon State. And Oregon State's a team right now that I still don't trust. I've seen them win games, but their only top 100 win is a home win over UC Irvine. And I'm a big West guy, but if that's your best win, like, you haven't necessarily sold me.
Yeah, Rocco, what you got?
Yeah, I'm pretty similar to Connor. I have to pencil St. Mary's as 2, just Bennett's track record, and Thursday, Saturday format for the most part. This week's a Saturday, Monday format all year long. They'll be extra prepared for those first legs of each weekend, and then have a game plan to attack game 2. They navigated it so sensationally well last year. Obviously, some new characters, some new faces, a lot of things to work out really as they go forward in January. But I think some of these early games, the Pacific game today is a good start. A lot of good get right opportunities for the Gales, and I think eventually they'll be right there in contention to fight Gonzaga for number 1. And we'll see if they can't figure it out, they'll be in this mix with the other 4. I actually think the 3 through 6 is really, really tough to separate. I know Washington State's got the best resume so far, but with Howard completely gone for the year, they have to depend on their big three quite a bit. I thought the Washington game, even though Washington shot the ball well and it was a rivalry game and all that, and Washington being hungry a little bit, but I think it showed Washington State's probably going to hit a wall a few times this year in unexpected spots, just because I think they do have limitations, not only with their rotation, but also just with the different tools David Riley can use when things get hairy in any given game. Oregon State, you did a nice job, Connor, like calling out their potential flaws, but I do think both Washington State and Oregon State, as I mentioned earlier, are going to have substantially better home court advantages than San Francisco and Santa Clara. Hopefully, I'm wrong about that. I love both the Broncos and the Dons, but I do think those are going to be different types of trips. If you take the crowd part of it out, which you probably should as an analyst, and you just think about the travel, getting to Pullman, getting to Corvallis, a little trickier than the other two. And I think that's going to throw some teams off the first go around, perhaps. In San Francisco's case, you got the Chips Newberry injury. I mean, I don't think they've officially said, but I think he's done for the year. I'm pretty sure he tore his ACL. I was there for that. It was not pretty. And I think this is a patchwork operation from here. He was such an important piece to the Dons team. And I love O'Donnell on defense. Barry Wang's got crazy offensive skills, but his defense extremely suspect. So Burleson's going to have to play the game with the Wang O'Donnell combo. He did it pretty well in the Loyola Chicago game. Obviously, fell short against Bradley. San Francisco, I love the guards. They can certainly dominate teams at home, but this is going to be patchwork from here. And Santa Clara, we've talked about quite a bit. I think they have the highest upside actually out of these four. But in my order, I guess I go Wazoo, Santa Clara, San Francisco. I guess Oregon State 6, but I really don't have it's like 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D for me.
Yeah, I got Santa Clara 1. I'm kidding. I got the same order as Rocco, actually. So I got, obviously, St. Mary's 2, Wazoo at 3. I do have Santa Clara at 4. I needed to fit in, a pro Santa Clara take at some point here. San Francisco at 5 and Oregon at 6. The biggest point of decision for me was whether to put us or whether to put San Francisco at 4 behind Wazoo. And I think it's two things. It's the Newberry injury. And as an optimistic Bronco fan, I'm choosing to believe that we're going to continue to get better and better. And I think you've seen that as the non-conference has progressed, winning 5 in a row. So that's what I got.
Am I going to end up being the Santa Clara optimist here? So I do have Gonzaga, St. Mary's 1, 2. I'm going with Santa Clara at 3. I'm again, like, I do think that 3 through 6, this is really close. Like, there is not a whole lot of separation between these teams. But the one thing I think Santa Clara has going for it that maybe the others don't is health. I think they're actually the healthiest of these groups. And while Elijah Mahi's injury, or depending on his duration, I did hear that it's not going to be that bad, so he should return pretty quickly. So I'm not as worried about that. But upside, like, this is a Santa Clara team that is also playing well right now. They had the best non-conference schedule of this group. This is a team that finished 3rd place in back-to-back years 2 and 3 years ago. So this is Herb Sendek has been able to get this team to that, and albeit he had a couple of NBA guys on those squads, but I still think that this is a team who has the potential to get up there. Washington State would be 4 for me. That's a team that, again, like, they've done so well in the non-conference despite the injuries, and I think that's a really great testament to what David Riley has been able to do on that roster construction and just the pace of play that they have. USF is 5 for me, only because, like, I am concerned about that Newberry injury. I think that's going to be a tough hill to climb for that team, because he is so critical to everything that they do. And yeah, like, everything that we've talked about with Oregon State, like, I think, like, I need to see where the offense is going to come from with the squad. They can defend, they do that well, but I don't know if they have enough offensive weapons to really kind of, like, overtake some of these other squads. And yeah, it's like with the Irvine win being like your only real marquee win, the way they lost to Nebraska the other night at the Diamond Head was also kind of a little concerning to me. It's like Michael Rataj became invisible in that game. So that's would be a concern to me. Again, like if that's your best player and he just vanishes in a title game like that, it's like gives me a little bit of pause on that. But yeah, it's like I think we're kind of all in this similar boat. Like we know like 1-2, it's obviously Gonzaga, St. Mary's. It's until proven otherwise, it's those two. And then 3-6, it is going to be a crapshoot. It's going to be a lot of fun watching this squad. It all starts obviously today. That LMU USF game is going to be obviously like one of those that really tips the scale. And Santa Clara USF on Monday at the Hilltop, which is obviously usually one of the best games of the year. That's going to be a lot of fun to see on a weird Monday, but that'll be good. All right, before we get out of here, any last thoughts as we start WCC play?
Yeah, I'll just build on the Newberry injury. I kind of sneakily like the Tyrone Riley at the 4 with the other 1 through 3 offensively for San Francisco. I think they had that with, probably Lingard at the 5. They don't necessarily have a ton of good shooting, but I don't think they did to start. Like they didn't have plus shooting really anyways. But like that lineup to me, even without Newberry, I think can throw a lot of teams off because they can just that lineup will be able to get up and down the court. And I know San Francisco doesn't necessarily like to play fast, but with the way that they can really, I think, play defense, that'll allow them to turn a lot of the turnovers that they do force and a lot of the rebounds that they do grab into some transition opportunities for a kind of 4-out lineup that I think they could run, because I think we've seen Riley play some at the 4 this season, not necessarily a ton, but I think that's something that we might see a lot more going forward.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys for hopping on. It's been great to talk some college basketball. WCC play starts today. We also have the great Gonzaga UCLA game, which I believe is at 1:00 now, obviously with some of the TV rearrangements and everything else from Intuit Dome. But also going to mention San Diego's going to be playing in that same building too. They're taking on Grand Canyon, so both the other WCC teams will be at Intuit for that one. And the Toreros have been, and I'll just leave it at that, where they have been. But once again, thanks a lot, guys, for hopping on. WCC play begins today, and let's get it. Let's get to it.
Thanks, Zach.
Let's do it.